So it is now Monday, November 27th, 2023. I'm going to review the last week's articles as I generally do on Monday. So over the course of the week, I've covered a number of these, but there are some that I just didn't get a chance to talk about. There's about 50 to 60 articles here that I'll just talk about the headlines, and then sometimes in some of them I will go on and add a little context. But this will give you a pretty good overview of what happened over the course of the last week. So we'll start with Sunday, 19 November 2023. There was a wave of drone attacks on Kyiv for a second night, and we know how that works out. It's never good. There was this great article from a Ukrainian general said, "We want them to be cold and hungry." Now, as I'm speaking, last night, it snowed. There was a huge storm, and I was thinking, man, it must be terrible to be a soldier. Right. It's terrible to be out there in the cold, but it's also terrible for the other side as well. And Ukraine is far more motivated than the Russians are to be in that cold and snow in order to defeat their adversary, because this is some kind of existential threat. Okay, we want them to be cold and hungry. They don't plan to stop during the winter. Like last year, the tempo slowed down significantly during the winter, but Ukraine's planning to make winter intolerable for Russian invaders. Okay, next article, Congress faces a fierce battle over Israel and Ukraine aid. Nothing really has shifted over the last week. 60 Minutes had this newsmakers, Ukrainians accuse Russia of kidnapping, indoctrinating Ukrainian children. Now officially, and I talked about this in the video, officially Ukrainian government has documented more than 19,000 children taken by Russia. But they told us that they worry that the actual number could be closer to 300,000. Now, if there's just one child that's kidnapped, that's a crisis. I mean, we have Amber Alerts in the United States. One child is kidnapped, it lights up the whole eastern seaboard, for example, or whatever, just because one child is lost. 19,000 documented, probably closer to 300,000. I don't even know what to say to that. Zalinsky calls for operational changes to Ukraine military after sacking a commander. This was the commander over the medical services, and she was removed. Somebody else is put in place. I don't know the backstory, but you don't generally change a commander unless there's a reason to do so. Something is inadequate. Monday, 20 November, head of Ukrainian agency suspected of graft was fired. Quote, the Ukrainian government on November 20 dismissed the chief of the country's State Service of Special Communications and Information Protection. His name was Yuri Shaikol, and they informed him that he was suspect to an investigation of embezzlement of 62 million hryvnias. That's the equivalent of $1.72 million. Yeah, it looks like it wasn't treason in like giving, information to the enemy, but it was graft. He was trying to line his own pockets, and that's terrible for him to be doing during this kind of time. So yeah, okay. Russia may complete special military operation in spring of 2024, says Pravda. Well, I mean, this kind of article keeps coming up, and they keep moving the dates back. Russia could begin full mobilization after 2024 presidential election, a Kyiv official says, and that is possible. Putin wants to get himself reelected, and he wants to make sure that goes smoothly. Now, he can rig the election, but you rig at the margins. You don't just try to tick off the entire population and then win a rigged election. Okay, Ukrainian moms go undercover in Russian-occupied territory to rescue abducted children. There's a video about this in CBS News. It'll break your heart. Biden rates are at historic lows in the polls. Now, I saw that in RT, but I saw it the night before on Fox News. And when I see it in Fox News, it's a different experience than when I see it in RT, and RT, it just makes me angry. In Fox News, I'm just saying, okay, well, this is what one side's saying about the other side. And if you go to CNN, you'd see about the reverse of that. Ukrainian optimism fades at the start of another winter war. By the way, that Fox News and RT, that was an NBC poll. It was legitimate. Biden's rates are at historic lows. And now, of course, Trump's rates are also at historic lows in some quarters too. I'm getting flyers at my house about how we got to ditch Trump and vote for somebody else, and you're seeing commercials on TV saying, look, we can't do another 4 years of Trump. So there's something there as well on the other side. Ukrainian optimism fades as the start of another winter war begins. I think there's something to that. I was feeling very bleak this time last week because of like you're settling into it's going to be a far longer war than you were thinking of. A woman was detained for allegedly setting fire to an enlistment office in Russia's Kaliningrad. Now, I didn't speak to that last week, but there was a rash of these that happened about 5 months ago, 6 months ago. Maybe I'm off by a month or so, but there was a rash about half a year ago of this kind of thing happening. And I don't know if this is a new trend or just what. The U.S. Army tests new missiles to replace ATACMS and weapons Ukraine has used to punish the Russian helicopter fleet. So they are working at getting some more missiles, but nothing has actually happened here. So it's not a really good article in that sense. Ukrainian Optimism, we just talked about. Fox CEO Lachlan, and thank you for correcting me, those of you that did, because I was like, Lakeland? Lachlan Murdoch meets Volodymyr Zalinsky in a signal of support for Ukraine. So I saw this a week ago, and then yesterday I saw the commentators talking about how, look, Trump's not going to do well in Iowa. He's not going to do well in South Carolina. I just don't see, like, I saw, like, maybe because I saw this, I saw that. That kind of thing does happen, and I have to guard against that tendency. But there was real pushback against Trump for the first time in this kind of forum that I had seen. So just keep looking at it. Okay, Pentagon chief, Tuesday, November 21, says we will continue working with Congress to approve additional funding for Ukraine. It's good to know they're not. He's not looking to lack in support. We're just waiting on what Congress does. Next article, more than 10,000 civilians killed in Ukraine war. UN says, yeah, but that's only 10,000 documented. There's certainly much more than that. It's probably double that number. And okay, Berlin unveils a 1.1 billion pound military aid package. It's in pounds because it was in the Guardian, this particular article. So that's good. Germany is stepping up, and it looks like Germany is stepping up in a big way. Poland also is stepping up. Duda, on the anniversary, he's the Polish president or prime minister, I'm trying to remember, I think president. On the anniversary of the Euromaidan, Poland unwaveringly to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainians, support them in the fight against the aggressor. So that's interesting that he was standing, like, the dust-up between Ukraine and Poland was one of the biggest unforced errors of the entire war, where Zelensky sent something during the UN, his UN speech. It didn't need to happen. Now, there's also these trucks blocking on the border, and from what I understand, the truckers are from the party that is pro-Russia, but Poland hasn't done anything about it, and yeah, it's just a little bit messy. Okay, Wednesday, 22 November, nearly half of Americans think that the U.S. is spending too much on Ukraine aid, says an AP poll. Now, a number of you, when I talked about this, said, I don't trust that poll. No, it's an AP poll. It's a legit poll, so I would trust that. But it's actually down some from what it was before. And part of the reason that we think they're spending too much is because we proposed $106 billion, but we never actually passed $106 billion. But that's what people heard, so they're not really necessarily paying attention. Foreign intelligence head says that Putin is convinced that return of Ukraine and the rest of historical Russian lands is possible only as part of a global redistribution of the world. Yeah, so Putin wants to return these historic Russian lands, and that should get send red flags up for everybody. You should hear alarm bells when you start hearing that kind of language. There is a European Broadcasting Union study that exposes brutal Russification in occupied Ukraine, and that includes education or using sexual violence or all kinds of issues. The way that wherever Russia went, very bad things have followed within Ukraine. Poland charges 16 foreigners with spying for Russia. They're working that out there. There's also a spying ring in Ukraine as well, and I'm just reading about that this morning. And one of the things that they said was, like, we just converted the KGB to the SBU. We should have started over, but we know that there are people within our ranks that we have to root out yet. That was an article from this morning. It's not from here. Ukraine coal miners to turn to women to solve staff shortages. So, like Rosie the Riveter in World War II. Well, I mean, you have to backfill the men somehow, and they need to get the coal out. So it's a very small population, but it was an interesting article. Umarov talked about how asymmetric solutions defeat Russian Black Fleet. And they really have. I mean, think about how without a navy going head-to-head against the Russians in the Black Sea, they've damaged about 15 ships and destroyed another 15 ships, and that's pretty impressive. Ukraine receives a $1.7 billion tranche of macro financial assistance from the EU, and the European Commission president announced the next distribution of another 1.5 billion assistance for Ukraine that's coming in the pipeline. Zalinsky says at this stage the Russian army makes prisoners the main source of replenishing losses on the battlefield. I'm not sure that that's the main source. I think that that's an overstatement, but they are really going into prisons and still recruiting. It's what Wagner did. I remember about February last year when Wagner was doing this, maybe it was January, somebody was like, that's just genius if you take away the moral implications of it, because it get rid of their prison population and sends them to the battlefield, and so you're killing those two birds with one stone. But it's morally so repugnant that they're doing that. Okay, Zalinsky in the stage, the Russian, we just talked about that. Putin's war rhetoric smacked down by Western nations at the G20. So he went to the G20 and delivered a speech, but he also had to endure hearing other leaders talking about what he's doing is wrong and repugnant and all that. And it got under his skin, and he went off script at some point and was like pretty rattled by that. Okay, Thursday, 23 November, Estonia accuses Russia of weaponizing immigration at Europe's borders. So Finland has closed a number of their border crossings, except for one at the very top, and with Russia, because the Russians were pushing these immigrants to create kind of a border crisis. It's a hybrid war attack on Finland, and that's what Finland was not going to be taking any of that. They're going to control their own borders. Ukraine strike kills Russian actress performing in Ukraine, a theater, they say. Okay, this was in a Reuters article. Quote, the unidentified investigator said that one civilian, of whom he gave no further details, has been killed, but made no mention of military casualties. The Russian Defense Ministry declined to comment and has mentioned no casualties from the attack. So apparently this actress was killed, but who was she performing for, or what was going on? And I mean, if there were a bunch of soldiers that she was performing for, that's kind of a different picture than just the way that RT or Pravda would gin that up. Last couple articles on Thursday, that was Thanksgiving in the United States. I'm an American spending Thanksgiving as a combat nurse under fire in the front line in Ukraine. She left in the spring of 22, and she has been doing nursing for Ukraine ever since, and she's evacuated over 1,000 soldiers while she has been doing this. And I'm just like, wow, that's just amazing. It was really just an amazing thing to read. Zalinsky hails the Air Defense Coalition formed by the Ramstein Group on Thursday, and so hopefully they'll get greater air defense. They really do need air defense until they have the air power to match Russian air power. Friday, 24 November, Ukrainian coal mines. Oh, we already talked about that one in the previous day. Major drone attacks target Crimea, and so the Ukrainians did target Crimea, and there was some things hit. I'm not exactly sure what it was. I saw something about a big flamethrower system that was hit, and some other things, but it wasn't like Crimean Bridge kind of noteworthy. Ukraine likely took out 70 Russians in a strike, reported by the British on Friday, but this was about November 10th. So if you remember back to about November 5th, there was a ceremony. Ukrainian soldiers were gathered together a little bit too much, and some drones saw them, and they took out a couple dozen Ukrainian soldiers in that strike. Well, this was the reply. Europe should offer Trump a Ukraine deal he can't refuse. I talked about this in one of my 3 big stories, and the idea was like, how do you align Trump's interests so that he would support Ukraine? He should do it for the right reasons, like because this is wrong that an authoritarian government has run over a democratic state. But short of that, like they were talking about, like, you know, if you could make a deal with the United States that liquefied natural gas goes to Europe, it costs only this much, as opposed to, so Europe could spend money on that in trade for American arms to continue to flow if Trump were to become president. It was really a thoughtful article in Politico, and I thought that it could have some kind of legs. We don't know. We're nowhere near that yet. The first primaries are going to be coming up in the next couple of months, and we'll see if Trump gets the traction that it appears that he has had so far. But remember, this time in previous cycles, we thought like Jeb Bush was going to win, and if you don't know who Jeb Bush is, there's a reason. Like he was the governor of Florida, and he didn't, and Trump overtook him. So, okay. Ukrainian sappers say that it may take 30 years to demine lands around Bakhmut. Like, that's just amazing. Take 30 years to make the land safe after this tragic, tragic war. Ukraine and Lithuania are planning to create a joint ammo and drone production facilities, and that's good. I mean, the Baltic states have been really hawkish about making sure that Ukraine has what they need because they know that they're not too far from Russia, and they don't want to go back to what it was like being Sovietized. Zalinsky instructs to prepare for comprehensive plan for mobilization. I didn't talk about this, but this is really important. So, comprehensive plan for mobilization. What if Russia mobilizes, and what if we in Ukraine they need to go further and actually like call up everybody? Like, what they're laying the groundwork in case they need to do this kind of thing. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it's smart of them to be thinking through this kind of thing. Saturday, 25 November. Today was the 90th anniversary of the Holodomor. Okay, and while we're there, we had some fun where Ukraine's military says that Russia launched the largest drone attack since the start of invasion. Like on the day of the 90th anniversary of the Holodomor. And I spent a few videos talking about what the Holodomor was and how tragic it was. And yeah, and they're doing it on that day. I can't tell if Russia meant to do that or if they were just tone deaf, but this was the largest drone attack of the invasion. Sanctions should affect grain from occupied territories, say the president of Latvia and Lithuania. So Russia has stolen, and I heard this, when I say heard this, I take news articles and I have them read them to me. So I'm listening to them in the car, I'm listening to it on headphones or whatever, and just trying to digest it as much as possible because you only have so much time in a day. So this morning I understood that there was like something crazy like $1 billion in stolen grain or something. I don't, please don't quote that, but it was stolen grain from the 4 oblasts that Russia has shipped out. And so they need to have sanctions on grain from the occupied territories. How the West lost the artillery shell race and what it means for Ukraine was an article in the Telegraph. So the shells that we see now are in country because of something that we did 5, 6, 10 months ago, something along those lines. And if you're creating new shells, if you're building new shells, it's going to take, there's going to be a lag time. And so there is, it's almost like if a boxer wins a fight, he doesn't win on, like, he won the fight officially on the night that he fought and beat his opponent, but he really won in training over months for the last year. It's that kind of thing where, like, we have to think in those terms if we're going to make sure that Ukraine has the supplies that they need in order to endure. Kremlin declares a former Russian PM a foreign agent. So he was a prime minister under Putin early on, and he became part of the opposition, and he's now declared a foreign agent. So, yeah, that's kind of, stay away from a hotel window. I don't know that he's planning to run against Putin or anything, but that's a bad place for him to be. Singaporean couple built 500 homes on the Ukrainian front lines as the war raged around them. And here's how they did it. Well, what they did, they built modular homes and they drove the price way down, and they used local timber and things along those lines. It was a really impressive article. It was almost as touching as the article about the nurse that I just mentioned. Ukrainian artillery commander said that there is a competition between brigades to see who can kill the most Russians. I bet there is. Now, that's good as long as it doesn't get to the point where we're not supporting you over here because you're going to do that over there or something. But that's good or healthy as long as the competition doesn't go too far. SBU head said the Crimean Bridge is doomed. I believe it is. It's only a matter of time, and it's not something that they can really defend. I think it's 18 kilometers long, and they can attack from air, they can attack from sea, they could drive a lorry over it or something. A lorry is a truck. I'm using the British term. That's how much British news I've been ingesting here. Okay, Sunday, 26 November 2023, Ukraine retaliated against Russia's mass attack with 35 drone strike. Now, I talked about that last night, and the drone strike, apparently, when I first recorded this, we didn't have any details. Apparently, Ukraine came out with something I watched this morning where they hit a tank factory. Now, tank is not necessarily the right term because it was like tractors and tanks building the same kind of thing in the same towns. In the Soviet system, you might have a one type of production city. We don't think about that in the West because, you might be spread out all over, but we build our tanks here, we build our farm equipment here, we build this here, we build missiles there. And you might just, I mean, that's all that they were trying to manage society. And so they did that. So this particular city was known for this kind of production, and apparently there were some big explosions. Couple that with also the Moscow airport was shut down for a little while, and so there was an effect. When I did the report yesterday, though, I hadn't heard about the effect. All that I heard about were that things happened and there was problems on the ground, but the local governors were saying, don't report anything, don't take pictures, don't say anything. And so we know that something happened, but we didn't know what it was. And by the time I actually got the video out, because I have a life too, there was apparently some movement, and Anna from Ukraine did a good job talking about that today. So go look at her video. Russia says that Ukraine attacked Moscow and other cities. Ukraine is preparing for a possibility of war spreading beyond its east and south. Ukraine's joint forces commander. So it could be like they're. Again, this is something that you hope doesn't happen, but it could be like, what if Russia could break through somewhere and then push? You have to have contingency plans for that. Now, this was absolutely fascinating to me. Russia loses 93 UAVs, 11 tanks, and over 1,000 soldiers in a day, according to Ukraine. Now, that sounds like a lot. But again, listening to the news this morning, I'm trying to remember who it was. The British, no, not British Prime Minister, British Minister of Defense talked about how it was north of 900 soldiers lost on average over the last month. Russian soldiers lost on average. Like, that's incredibly high. But most of that is from Avdiivka. And because they keep just like pouring these soldiers into that. Okay, last article here on Sunday, that's yesterday. Ukraine arms industry boss calls for the country to be the arsenal of the free world. And I think this is what's going to happen with Ukraine. They're going to become this just by default, because of all the things that they have to do. This is going to be like their new production industry, and that's part of how they'll rebuild. Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to all those articles. I know I'm not exactly the most exciting person to listen to, but this should help you understand what happened over the course of the last week. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.